Hello, my friends. Today I'm going to read you a story from the book New England's Things That Go Bump in the Night by Robert Ellis Cahill. There are 8 stories in this book that take place throughout New England, and they're all supposedly true. This one is titled, Visiting Our Local Vampires. The boy from Brockton wasn't quite right in the head, but the judge wouldn't let him plead insanity. The judge did, however, accept his plea of vampirism. The boy had killed his grandmother and then started sucking her blood. He had a need to do it, he told the jury. He had been brought up on horse blood sandwiches and became addicted to drinking blood with every meal. This wasn't a macabre case from the days of Dracula or the Dark Ages, but occurred in 1981 in Brockton, Massachusetts. It wasn't the first time vampirism reared its ugly bat-like head in New England. In the previous 2 centuries, there were at least 3 cases of vampirism or assumed vampirism in Rhode Island, only 25 miles from Brockton, and 2 more in Vermont. Quote, a vampire, Webster explains in his dictionary, is a blood-sucking ghost or reanimated body of a dead person believed to come from the grave and wander about the night, sucking the blood of persons asleep. One who lives by preying on others, a bloodsucker, commonly a woman who uses her attractions to bring her lover to a debased or impoverished condition. Also a vampire bat, any of various bats popularly but erroneously believed to suck the blood of animals, unquote. In the early 1770s, a Rhode Island farmer named Stuckley, the father of 14 children, feared that his oldest daughter, Sarah, was a vampire. Sarah ruled the roost, bossing her brothers and sisters and occasionally her mother and father as well. She seemed to take great delight in slaughtering the farm animals. The younger children complained to their parents that Sarah licked the blood from her fingers as if it were honey or jelly. In her early 20s, Sarah suddenly contracted consumption, and within a few months she was dead. Shortly after Sarah was buried, one of her younger sisters began coughing up blood. The local doctor diagnosed her disease as the supposedly incurable consumption, later known as tuberculosis. In her delirium, the younger sister told the parents that the ghost of Sarah visited her each night to sit on her stomach and to suck blood from her neck. The highly contagious consumption spread through the family, and as 5 more of Stuckley's children became ill and slowly suffocated to death, they all complained of nightly visits from Sarah. Half of Farmer Stuckley's family was wiped out within 2 years. When his wife took ill, and also complained of nightmares in which Sarah came to her, seemingly for destructive purposes, he decided to take action. He, with the help of his neighbors, exhumed the body of his daughter Sarah. Opening the casket, they found her remarkably well preserved, her hair and fingernails still growing, which to Stuckley and his friends was enough to suspect that Sarah was indeed a vampire who left her grave each night to suck the blood from the living. When they cut into Sarah's body, they discovered that her heart was still filling with blood. This was the damning proof of vampirism. Farmer Stuckley cut his eldest daughter's heart out, placed it in an iron pot in front of his house, and with all the neighbors as witness, burned the heart to a crisp. The ritual over, everyone went home, and 2 weeks later, Mrs. Stuckley died of consumption. Exactly 100 years later, 1874, the Providence Journal recorded that, quote, in the village of Placedale, Rhode Island, William Rose dug up the body of his daughter and burned her heart, for she was drawing energy from the members of the family, unquote. Although the reporter doesn't say that the reason for William Rose's action was fear that his daughter was a vampire, it's obvious that his bizarre ritual was to combat vampirism. Quote, if the heart of one of the family who dies of consumption is taken and burned, reports Daniel Ransom in his memoirs of the 19th century, others would be free of the curse. Daniel's own brother, Frederick Ransom, died of consumption in 1817 in Vermont. Quote, Father, having some faith in the remedy, writes Daniel, had the heart of Frederick taken out after he had been buried, and it was burned at Captain Pearson's blacksmith forge. However, it did not prove a remedy, for mother, sister, and 2 brothers died with that disease afterward. unquote. In the first week of October 1890, the Boston Transcript reported a story of vampirism at Woodstock, Vermont, where some 50 years earlier, 4 local doctors of high intelligence and education burned the heart of a man named Corwin who had died of consumption. The entire population of Woodstock gathered on the green to witness the burning of the heart in an iron pot. Once the heart had burned to ashes, it, still in the pot, was buried 15 feet down into the center of the green, and a granite boulder weighing many tons was set on top of it. Then, all was covered up, and the blood of a bull sprinkled over, and the green was reseeded, as if the event had never taken place. This was done to save the vampire Corwin's brother, who was also dying from consumption, obviously caught from his dead brother, who visited each night to suck the lifeblood out of him. When the body of the dead Corwin was exhumed 6 months after the burial, as expected, Dr. Joseph Gallup discovered that the vampire's heart contained its victim's blood. The exorcism of the green was considered a necessary, if gruesome, procedure by Gallup and 3 other doctors of the village. Even more ghastly is that the sick Mr. Corwin was to swallow some of the ashes of his dead brother's heart mixed with bull's blood in order to break the vampire's curse and reverse the progressive wasting of the victim's body. The most celebrated case of vampirism occurred less than 100 years ago at Wickford and Exeter, Rhode Island. Again, vampirism fears were aroused because of an outbreak of tuberculosis within a family. George Brown's wife, Mary of Exeter, died of the disease on December 8, 1883. Within 6 months, her daughter, Mary, aged 20, passed away of the same dreaded disease after much suffering. George Brown had 6 more daughters and only 1 son, Edwin. Edwin was married and owned his own farm at West Wickford, some 5 miles away from his parents' home. 5 years earlier, after his sister Mary died, Edwin contracted tuberculosis, and fearful that he'd also die after long suffering like his sister and mother, moved to the Rocky Mountains to improve his health. There, less than a year later, he received word that his younger sister, Mercy Brown, age 19, had also died of tuberculosis. Edwin headed back east in 1892, determined to lick the plague that was slowly but surely wiping out his whole family. In Colorado, the popular cure for combating tuberculosis was to, quote, eat the fried heart of a rattlesnake, unquote. But Edwin had also learned during his New England upbringing that vampires were a cause of the spread of the disease, and that the burning of the heart of the vampire was the actual cure. He didn't know which of his deceased family members were causing his blood to be sapped, so he had all 3 bodies exhumed. His mother and Mary were skeletal, but his sister Mercy, dead only 2 months, looked fresh as the day she was buried. Her heart was examined by the Exeter physician, and whole blood was found in her heart, meaning only one thing, quote, Mercy was a vampire, unquote. Right there at the Chestnut Hill Cemetery in Exeter, Mercy's heart was cut out of her body, and the body was reburied. The heart was then burned at the stake nearby, and like all the rattlesnake hearts he had eaten in the Rockies, Edwin chomped on the fried heart of his sister Mercy, with the hope that his sickness would soon go away. The grisly cure didn't work, however, and Edwin Brown died a few weeks later. So you see, Count Dracula and blood-sucking bats are but childish fairy tales compared to our robust New England vampires. Eat your hearts out, you Transylvanian wimps. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thanks for joining me. I will be reading more out of this book, so stay tuned for future uploads.